Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Mandeville. I'm a PhD candidate at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Today I'll share some of the results from a deep dive into the literature focusing on one specific data type, presence-only biodiversity data. Now, these results come from a systematic review conducted with my three co-authors listed here on this slide. We're in the process of publishing this work, hopefully in the not so distant future, but for now, these results should be considered preliminary. This work came from a systematic review where we tried to comprehensively evaluate any and all peer-reviewed English language articles with just one common characteristic, the use of presence-only biodiversity data. Now, by presence-only data, we mean point occurrences where an organism was observed, with just two key elements, the taxon ID and the location. So where do these data come from? Well, two of the most commonly discussed sources are citizen science and digitized historical data. Both of these data sources have been growing over the last couple of decades, fueled partially by growing technological capacity. And data from these sources have been widely shared in online data platforms for reuse. GBIF is a major example of this. Now, these trends have been reported on a lot, but we wondered whether there are other sources of presence-only data that might not be receiving as much attention. Presence-only data are also an interesting subject for review because they come with unique challenges in analysis. There's a lot of ongoing innovation in best practices for working with this data type, so we wanted to look at what analysis approaches data users are actually applying on the ground. And then lastly, presence-only data are interesting from an open science perspective, which is primarily what I'll focus on today. In a lot of ways, simple presence-only data are among the most straightforward to standardize and share with an existing infrastructure and according to existing best practices. So they make a really nice case study to see how consistently data sharing practices are being adopted across a wide variety of users of this one particular data type. I won't spend a lot of time on methods, but just really briefly, we retrieved about 3,700 articles from Web of Science. Our search strategy targeted abstracts containing both one of 30 or so terms related to presence-only data structure and also one of 5 terms related to biodiversity. Then after screening the abstracts, we retained just under 2,000 articles. We used this full data set for some bibliometric analyses and topic modeling to look at broad themes. And then we took a random subset of 300 of these included articles, read them in full, and collected more specific data on their characteristics. So in terms of broad trends, we saw that the use of presence-only data has really increased over the last 15 or so years. And by breaking the data set into broad topics, we saw that at first this growth was more led by methodological papers, but recently applied research and data papers have become more common. Methods papers were also very highly cited at first, but their relative citation rate has dropped off in recent years. Now, this might suggest that applied researchers still cite more established methods more often, while newer methods might be taking longer to catch on. So generally, who are these researchers working with presence-only data? Again, this is coming from that broad review of our full data set of just under 2,000 papers. We first see that it's a really decentralized group of authors. There were well over 7,000 authors and nearly 500 journals represented in this set of papers. The average author contribution was pretty low, so these probably aren't researchers who work exclusively with presence-only data. Rather, they're primarily researchers who use a small amount of presence-only research as part of their broader work. There were just a small number of highly cited articles. And the authors are global in distribution, but so far centered in Europe and North America. Okay. So our results so far paint this initial picture of a broad, decentralized group of researchers, which is growing quickly. For a more detailed sense of the presence-only literature, we turned to the subset of 300 articles that we characterized based on a full text reading. First, we wondered, where are these users generally obtaining their data? To our surprise, most presence-only data analyzed in the literature are not obtained from open sources. So this histogram shows the sources of presence-only data for the 300 papers that we reviewed after reading in full. It's important to note that the responses for each study are not mutually exclusive. Some studies combine data from multiple sources. So we see here that 43% of papers accessed at least some of their data from open sources. The second most common source is original data collected by the study authors, followed by the literature, museums, and so on. So we already see that interest in presence-only data isn't only increasing because of the open sharing of citizen science and historical data. That's a big part of the story, but there's clearly more going on. Our next question then was whether many of the articles accessing data from these non-open sources were then openly sharing the data after publication. It turns out that that's largely not the case. So here we can see 4 articles that access data from each of the sources shown on the previous slide. What percentage of these articles then openly share all their data? The dark blue represents data shared according to FAIR principles, that is, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. The medium shade of blue is data that's shared in a way that doesn't quite meet some portion of that standard, for example, as a standalone appendix to the paper. And then the light blue represents data that isn't shared at all. We also wondered about the structure of presence-only data in the literature. It's often assumed that presence-only data are typically totally unstructured because common examples like citizen science are often collected opportunistically. But presence-only data doesn't have to go hand in hand with opportunistic sampling. We wondered how common it was for presence-only data to be collected according to a known structured sampling design. It's an important question because information about sampling design, for example, metadata about observer effort, can open doors for more analysis options. So we see here that we found nearly half of articles that use presence-only data do not describe the structure of the data. But of those that do, quite a few have some level of structure that could help inform analysis. The distribution of data structure reporting is relatively consistent among the different data sources. And just kind of as an aside, we were also interested to see that even pretty simple information about presence-only data sets, like sample size, was not always described. But back to the discussion of data structure. We saw less variation in analysis approach based on structure than we expected. In general, sort of along the lines of what we expected, more structured data are associated with more inferential analyses. But interestingly, a greater proportion of opportunistic data were involved in rarer inferential analyses than the other types. To some extent, that may be due to ongoing innovation in analysis methods that's been largely focused on opportunistic data. And overall, these are the analysis approaches that were taken in our set of 300 papers. Species distribution modeling was dominant, but there was really a wide range of approaches. So one of the major themes of our results was that there's more nuance in the relationship between presence-only data and open data than we expected. And this was kind of surprising because there's a lot of guidance and infrastructure to support the sharing of presence-only data. So we were curious about why so much presence-only data go unshared. To try to dig into this a little bit more, we looked at 3 subsets of the articles in our study. We put together broad profiles of 3 different types of presence-only data users defined by the sources they access their data from. We'll first take a quick look at articles that used at least some data from an online open data aggregator. Of these papers, just over half combined their open data with some presence-only data from other sources. The open data sources that were accessed varied a lot. The roughly 130 articles we reviewed that used open data accessed this data from 120 different open databases. 8 of these were what we considered large. That is, they had a very broad spatial extent, taxonomic scope, or both. 57% of open data papers accessed one of these large databases. The remaining 112 databases were what we considered small. That is, they were more niche in geographic location or in taxonomic scope. 63% of open data users accessed one of these smaller databases. This is an interesting pattern because there's research indicating that small databases are less likely to persist into the future or to keep up with best practices for standardizing data. But we're seeing that they do play a major role in researchers' open data access. About 2/3 of these articles use data from just one open source. And about 60% were small or regional in scope. Now we're going to shift focus briefly to look at the subset of articles that exclusively use data from open sources, did not combine it with data from other sources. Nearly half of these did not describe the structure of their data. 40% described the structure as opportunistic. Turning then briefly to the other subset of open data users, those that have integrated open data with data from other sources. We hypothesized that authors who have demonstrated familiarity with open data by using it would be more likely to then share their own data that they accessed from other sources. But this wasn't really the case. Only 24% of articles in which open data were integrated with other data made all of their data available after publishing, which is right around the overall average. So our overall impression of an open data user was a little different than we expected. Many users of open data rely on small, relatively niche data aggregators and share their own data less often than I would have expected. Next, we can take a look at the 18% of our articles that used exclusively presence-only data collected by the authors themselves. Only 19% of these articles published their full data sets. But on a positive note, the majority explicitly described the sampling design behind their data. Most had some level of structured sampling design. The vast majority of these studies are small or regional in scale. And on a potentially related note, articles that relied on original presence-only data were almost 4 times as likely to be directly related to conservation, interventions, and decisions than those with data from open sources. So we found with this user group that there's a sizable group of articles where original data are analyzed in a presence-only framework. And I think this group of articles often gets overlooked in conversations about presence-only data. On average, these data tend to be more structured, more often related to conservation, and not so frequently shared. Speculating on the reasons for this, it's possible that some of these researchers just don't have the incentive or resources to share their data, or it may be less obvious to researchers how to share the metadata associated with these semi-structured data. Whatever the reason though, this is clearly a group of data users that's producing a lot of data with the potential to be shared. And the final group we considered consists of researchers who used exclusively what we called found data. That is, they didn't collect it themselves or access it from an open source. These data come from management agencies, nonprofit organizations, the literature, and so on. The percentage of this data that gets shared openly is really similar to what we saw with original data. And the typical study scale was somewhat in between that of original and open data users. Found data articles are also more likely to be related to conservation themes than those based on open data. The main difference from original data was that users of found data were less likely to report on data structure, possibly because they don't always have access to this information. So once again, these researchers who are compiling data from different non-open sources represent a big potential for new data to be shared. Collating data from different sources is really a substantial investment of time and effort, and increasing the sharing of this data could draw more research value out of that effort. Of course, in reality, this isn't a simple issue. The same reasons that original data users may not share their data could apply here as well, and complexities of data ownership can also make it difficult to openly share data that are compiled from many sources. So here are some of our main takeaways. The use of presence-only data is increasing. In addition to the well-known growth of citizen science and historical data, researchers are taking advantage of increasingly common analysis approaches for presence-only data to analyze presence-only data sets from a wide variety of sources. We see this as a really positive trend, but it also presents a lot of opportunities to further optimize the reuse of these data and the reproducibility of the studies in which they're applied. Many researchers are relying on data from small data sets that may not be stable into the future, and many don't report metadata. Additionally, many presence-only data do go unshared. In particular, smaller studies and those with direct conservation applications tend to be negatively correlated with data sharing. So further research on how to lower barriers to data sharing with those particular data users could be really valuable. Overall, we expect that as presence-only analysis methods keep getting more popular, the number of researchers who are collecting and analyzing this data type will keep growing. So there's an exciting opportunity to help align that growth with best practices for data sharing whenever possible. So with that, thanks very much for listening to this talk. I'd love to talk more about it with anyone who's interested, so feel free to contact me through the BES conference platform or with the contact information on this slide. Thanks again, and have a nice time with the rest of the conference.